Hey guys, welcome back to part 12 of this endless runner game tutorial series in Unreal Engine. And in this video, we are going to add environment in our game. So the game will look a lot better from now. Also, these environment won't be totally random and will be flexible as much as you want to customize. And also, you can download this whole project from my Patreon. So you don't have to make the whole game yourself and speed up your process. So do not forget to check that out. All the links are in the description. So now to make environment for our game, in your content browser go to this construction volume folder and go to meshes, and from here we are going to select the assets that we are going to use as our environment. Well, you can use your creativity and use any of them, or maybe use any other asset pack to make them. I would recommend that, but just for the sake of tutorial, I'm going to stick to this. So here the first asset that I'm going to use is this water tank. Well, we can use many of them to cover the sideways. So first let's scale this a bit. I'm gonna give it the scaling of 4 at each axis. And let's place this at the sideway. And now we are going to place multiple of them throughout the whole way. So let's divide the viewport and switch to top view. So this way it's way easier to align the assets properly. So let's keep duplicating them till the end of the road. And when you are done with the one side, select all of them and duplicate them to the other side. And try to place them symmetrically to the other side. Now when you are done with that, we are going to turn all these into a single asset. So for that, let's select this first water tank first, and after that select all of them. Once you selected all of them, go to your tools, and from here go to merge tools. And these are all the assets you have selected, so just click on merge actors. Now you have to give the location where you want to save it. So inside the asset folder, I'm gonna create a new folder to keep all of our environment assets. And inside that, I'm going to save this. So there I have our first environment asset, and you can see it's exactly that, just a single asset. So now let's place this onto our road. So for that, let me copy the location of this asset to place it onto our road. But before that, I'm gonna select all these assets and press H to hide them. Now let's place this on the road. And now we need to edit its pivot at the center so that we can spawn this environment precisely at the runtime. So let's do that, and when you are done, make sure the pivot is at the starting of the road and at the center. And once you are done that, accept it, and now the pivot has been changed permanently. So let's delete this asset and unhide all those assets which we hid before, because now we are going to edit them slightly to give them a complete new look. And the thing that we are going to do is just rotate them 20 degrees like this. And you can do the same on the other side. It's just a bit challenging since the pivot is on the opposite side this time. So after the rotation, you have to place them manually. And after you are sure that they look symmetrical, you can repeat the same procedure which we did for the previous environment asset. That is merging it and editing its pivot at the center. And after you are done, and now we can move on to make another environment asset. So this time I'm gonna choose this tunnel. So let's place this in the level and scale this a bit. I'm gonna give it the scaling of around 5. And to make it a bit longer, to cover up the whole road, let's give it some scale on the y-axis. And it sort of looks like we are going into the cave while we are running on the road. So that's gonna look really good. And after you're done with the placement, just repeat the same process for this as well. That is merging and editing its pivot. So now let's delete this one and move on to the another environment asset. And this time let's go to low polycity folder, and here in the meshes, I'm going to select this little bridge you see here. Like this is also going to look really great. So let's scale this a bit. I'm gonna give it the scaling of 8 on the each axis. And let's lessen its width a bit, like let's give it 7.75 on the y-axis. Yeah, now it looks great. And there's one thing to notice here, with this scale, it can cover up to 3 roads into this single environment asset. So that's what we have to keep in mind when we are gonna write logic for spawning the environments, because this is going to be an exception. So now let's repeat the same procedure with this environment asset too, that is merge it and edit its pivot. And now we are done with setting up our environment assets. You can add as much as you want, but I am okay with these 4. And now let's go to your blueprint folder. And here let's create a new folder for environment where we are gonna keep all the blueprints for our environment assets. So let's right click and create a blueprint class of vector type. And let's name this base environment BP since it's going to be the base class for all the environment blueprints we are gonna have in our project. Let's open this up. And first thing first, we are going to add stacking mesh for our environment, and let's name this environment mesh. And like in this stacking mesh component is for our environment assets. Like here we're gonna set these assets in its child blueprint, but since this is a base class, we don't need to do that here. The only thing you need to make sure here is that your collision preset is set to no collision, since we don't want any collisions in our environment assets. Now let's create child blueprints of this base class. And I'm gonna name this environment 1 BP. And since we have 4 environment assets, I'm gonna create 4 child blueprint of this base class. And now we need to go into each class to set the respective stacking mesh. So like for this first environment blueprint, I'm gonna set the stacking mesh to this one, and just like that, you have to set the stacking mesh for the 3 blueprints. So once you are done with all of your environment blueprints, now we need to spawn them into the level. And to do that, let's go to our game mode. Now the first thing here we are gonna do is just like these obstacle and platform classes, we are gonna create a variable that will store all the environment classes we have in our project. So in the variable type, search for base environment BP and select class reference. And make sure it's an array so you can store multiple classes. So here we have these 4 environment classes and we are gonna add all of them into this variable. Alright, now we are gonna create a function to get random environment from this array, just like we made for obstacle and platform. So what we are going to do is, let's duplicate this function and let's name this get random environment. And in this function, let's replace this platform class with our environment class array. And here connect this pin as output and delete this platform class output and name this parameter environment class. There you go. And now we can get this function to get random environment each time. And now we need to write spawn environment event just like we did for the obstacle and platforms. So here in the flow BP, let's make some space here. And here let's create a custom event. Let's name this spawn environment and let's add an input parameter. And let's name this parameter environment class. And here search for base environment BP. And select the class reference here. So to this parameter, we are going to receive which environment we are gonna spawn. So first let's call this event in our game mode and we are gonna call this right here when we add a new flow, just with that. So here after these 2 events, we are gonna spawn our environment. So get the flow BP reference where that event is and we are going to call it. And the environment that we want to spawn is the random environment. So this is how we're gonna call this event. Now let's actually write the logic for this. So let's copy these 2 nodes from our previous spawning events. And here whatever the environment class we get, we are going to add that environment as a child actor in this flow BP. Now here for the location, like in other spawning events, we need to choose between different spawn points to decide their spawn location, which are basically the different lane locations. But in this case, we are not going to spawn the environments in any specific lane. Like there is going to be a constant location, which is the starting of the road. So to get its relative location, what we can do is, we can add an arrow component and place it just at the starting of the road so that we can retrieve that location from this arrow component. And it is there even if it's not looking, so don't worry about that. Now here, make transform. And to give it the location, get the start point and from this get its relative location. And plug this to the location attribute. So now the environment will spawn precisely with the road track. So now let's play and test this. So as you can see, the platforms are spawning into a level. But there are also many issues comes with that. Like they are so random that it looks kind of weird. And if you noticed, the very first road didn't have any environment. And the third issue is with this bridge. As I told you, it is going to be an exception because it covers like 3 roads within itself. So it's obviously gonna overlap with other environment. So we need to fix that too. Now in your game mode, where we spawn all of these things, here you can see we have these 3 separate events that we are calling one after another. So first let's call them in a structured way. Like for that, get a sequence and call them after each sequence. It doesn't really change the code, but makes it more manageable. Now here we're gonna make some changes here when we are spawning the environment. So first of all, we are gonna create a variable, name this environment repeat count. Make sure it's an integer and it should not be the array, should be a single variable. And the value inside this variable will decide how many times the current spawned environment will be repeated continuously. And when it turns 0, we are going to spawn a new environment. So that way it won't just change the environment asset so quickly. So first of all, we're gonna check if it is greater than 0. And if it is, we are going to spawn the same environment. I'm gonna change that random environment soon. But before that, if the repeat count is not greater than 0, that means it's equals to 0. So to manage all that thing, let's create a separate custom event. Let's call this setup new environment, and we are going to call this event when this condition is false. And after this sets the new environment, we are going to spawn that environment. Now here, rather than spawning a random environment, remove it. We are going to create a variable. Let's name this current environment. Make sure the variable type is base environment BP class reference and plug it here. Now let's write logic for setting up our environment. Now the primary task of this event is to set this current environment. Now first we are going to set the current environment to be the random environment. So it's gonna pick any random environment and store it inside this current environment variable. And then we are going to set this environment repeat count variable. And let's give it a random integer in range. So our environment can repeat like minimum 1 time to maximum 3 times. You can change it according to your use. So here the next time we try to spawn the environment, it checks its value, and if it is greater than 0, we are going to spawn the same environment. Otherwise it's gonna pick random repeat count along with the random environment again. Now since we are using a random environment, there is a chance that the same environment can repeat again. So to fix that, get your environment classes array, inside from which we are picking the random environment. And in this, there are all the environment classes we have in our project. So we are going to remove that one environment from this array, which is currently being spawned. Let's say it picks the first environment as the random environment. So we are going to remove it from the array, so it won't get picked next time. So the environment we're gonna remove is the current environment. Now after we remove it, we are going to store the removed environment into a variable so that we can add it again into this array when we are done spawning the next time. So let's name this variable removed environment and make sure it's a class reference of the base environment BP. Now we are going to set this variable after we remove our environment, and that removed environment is our current environment. Now after the first time we call this event, then the next time this removed environment variable is going to have a value inside it. So here convert it to a validate get so that we can ensure if there is a value or not. So if there is not, then of course we're gonna do our regular code. But if the value is valid, then we are going to add that removed environment back into our environment class. So here get the environment class, and we are going to add in this array. And the item that we're gonna add is the removed environment. So plug it here, and there you go. And after we add, we are going to repeat the same procedure. And now here, just make sure we need to decrement this repeat count every time we spawn the same environment. Like here the decrements means just -1 from the value. So we did that so it can count it properly and goes in the false condition when the count is 0. So now let's play and test this and see how it works. So the environment is pretty consistent now and it looks a lot better than before. But here's again this bridge problem where it covers 3 roads within itself, so it overlaps with other environment. So now we need to work on that. So first, when we assign a random environment, we are gonna check if that environment is our bridge environment, which is this one. So here we can get class display name to display the name of the class. We can also print the string to see the value. Like if we play on the top left corner, you can see all the environment classes, those got spawned. But here the problem is, there is not much we can do to identify the specific class. So there's a way that came into my mind is, like we can change its name. Let's give it bridge environment BP. And now we can use the keyword bridge to identify if the environment class is the bridge environment. So for that, from the class name, get the substring, and the starting index is going to be 0. And the length is going to be 6 since the word bridge has the 6 letters. Now we are gonna check if the string is exactly equals to the word bridge. So if it is false, then we are gonna run the regular code. But if the environment is bridge, then we are going to set the cooldown for spawning the next 2 environments. So for that, let's create a variable. Let's name this cooldown and make sure it's an integer. And set this variable here when this bridge condition is true. And we are going to set the cooldown of next 2 environment. So give it the number 2. So it's not going to spawn any environment for the next 2 floors. And in this condition, we are going to skip getting random repeat count and execute the further code. Now here, before we do all of this, first of all we are going to check if it is equals to 0. And only if the cooldown is equals to 0, then we are going to execute the code. Otherwise, we are just going to decrement it and wait until it turns 0. Now let's play and test this. Now there is this weird issue where the bridge gets removed very early. But if I show you like that, there you can see the cooldown effect is working and there is no environment overlapping issue now. So now to fix that issue, come to your floor BP, and here the issue is because of this death box is very close to the road. Like just for example, if I add this bridge mesh here, you can already see why that issue was coming. So we just need to simply shift this destroy box somewhere at the end of the bridge, like this. So when all of this get removed, player won't be able to see that from his camera view. So now let's play and test this. And as you can see, we passed through the whole bridge and it didn't get removed early. So the problem has been fixed. So that is it for this part of this tutorial series. If you really like this video, you can support me on Patreon, where you can get all the project files I've ever created for these tutorial videos. The link is in the description. And you can also join my Discord server, where you can interact with other developers of this community. And if this video really helped you out, you can like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I want to thank the Patreon members of this month. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot. Alright, till then, see you. Bye bye.